It seems that we're live. Okay, that's it. So hi everyone, and today I don't have the full 30 minutes, so it's probably gonna be a little bit quicker than usual. But feel free to stay on and discuss anything that you feel that there is more discussion to come. Um, so I didn't do much this past week. I was reviewing and merging some stuff, and I am kind of struggling in maintaining in sync what's going on in the JSON API module and keeping the core patch up to date. Right now there are no they haven't been there is no fork. Let's say that you can just copy it to the new location inside of the core directory and reformat the patch, and that should be pretty much it. But yeah, it's kind of a hassle to have to maintain both things, like the commits and the other patch, the commits in the contrib module and the other patch. So
if you find that a hassle, I don't mind doing it for you. I can't commit to JSON API module, but if you literally just leave me a ping, hey Wim, do you want to re-roll the core patch again? I'll do that. It's not a problem. I did exactly the same for the big pipe module. I don't mind doing it. I can just generate a list of commits that you made and post that if you find that too much of a hassle.
That would be helpful. I mean, let's say that we may split this task in the future now that you have offered to.
Okay, sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. So apart from that, I think that we are really close to tag a beta, at least, which I think that it's kind of a milestone in here, because it would mean that we freeze APIs, right?
Mm-hmm. But what is the API for the JSON API module? That's
right.
A good question, I think. So Chris's patch that adds validation was committed, I think, right? Or wasn't it?
Only part of it.
Only part of it.
But I think that the other part is actually maybe committed or very close to it.
Yeah, he re-rolled in its screen, so I think it may be like Daniel and I can review it again, because Daniel posted feedback and Chris addressed it. So that's my point that I wanted to make. What is the API of the JSON API module? I think that the only API is the normalizers, as in you can add normalizers for JSON API, just like you can for REST or for any other format. And the actual API that we really are providing to the world is the responses, right? And our ability to reply to requests and responses, I think. So we are freezing the API, but really there is not much of an API.
That's right, yes.
And that brings me to a very important point that I have been thinking about a lot in the past week. So in Drupal core REST, we are having a lot of problems getting improvements committed. So things that are seemingly obvious to fix, like, for example, Booleans and integers and floats are currently being presented as strings in the JSON responses. And actually, the JSON API module has the same problem. And so that is actually a bug that we would like to fix, because it's frustrating for front-end developers. But we can't, because technically making that change is breaking an API, because responses are slightly different, which might break clients, consumers of those responses. And so that is very tricky. And part of the problem there is the fact that the normalization system is directly inherited from Symfony, and it's frankly terrible, because it's the same weight/priority-based system as we had in the past. And we've been fighting the different priorities/weights in those normalizers for a long time now. And every time we need to add one, then there is another we need to change, kind of like we haven't we would actually need, or ideally we would have a way that is better in a JSON API module, but we don't really want to reinvent the system there. So it's very difficult to find a good balance.
I would say in defense of the serialization system in Symfony, which incidentally I ported over to Node.js this weekend, that at least it has a fancy filtering system for the eligible normalizers. Like it's not like a pure weight system. Like you can say which normalizers are supported for this particular data in this format, and then whenever you have multiple true returning from that, then that's when you have the weight system applied. But if you are very specific.
Yes, and ask Ted. He's been working on some patches that required him to change other priorities in order for his patches that improve things to be picked up by the serialization system. So you have to be careful with the priorities that you set initially, because otherwise you may make it impossible for future modules. For example, adding a more specific variant of a particular field type, then it's going to be impossible to have a custom normalizer for it.
Well, yeah, sort of thing. My question is like, why can't we take into account like the class hierarchy as well? Because we don't do that, right? But if we would like basically start from the most inner class and then go up the parent class tree, somehow we could maybe get rid of many of the priorities or weights.
That's interesting.
The problem with that is detecting siblings. I explored that path, and then when you have like in the tree, if it forks because someone I don't know thinks that they can just inherit from the entity reference field and make their own thing, how do they compare, right?
Yeah, I see.
At the end, you end up having the same problem in deeper and deeper edge cases. That is true. You resolve most of the things, but in the end, you're not able to get rid of the priorities completely.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, like Symfony's use case is different than Drupal's, because there you have the data, like you have your object defined and you know exactly what's in there.
Yes.
And
yeah, they don't have the crazy inheritance stuff that we have, basically, right?
They also don't have dynamic fields or configurable fields or something like that. And then I mean, the common use case is to actually like configure it via annotations and be done with it.
Yeah, it's much simpler for them, for sure. Yeah, so it makes sense for them, but that's like maybe I said it wrong. It's not that the system is necessarily bad. It's that the system is not a great match for Drupal's complexities and Drupal's needs. And so yeah, I just wanted to be careful there. And I think it's fine to mark the module as beta right now because it's not in core anyway. And if it's added to core, it will be in alpha at first anyway. So I think that's fine. I just wanted you to be aware of those difficulties, because we have one patch that is the most trivial one that is improving the normalization of entities and fields in Drupal Drupal Core's REST API, and that one is being blocked for many weeks now, and it's blocking several other more invasive or things that are arguably more backwards compatibility breaking. And so it's a very, very difficult subject area. So ideally, we would not have to go through the same pain in the future with the JSON API module, because I'm sure that there will be cases where we want to improve a certain normalization, and that we may end up running into the exact same problem. So I don't know what the exact solution would look like, though. So probably it's pointless to wait for a better solution for now. But just wanted you to be aware.
It sounds like, if everyone agrees with this, that we may want to hold off for the beta tag to resolve the typecasting issue that we have right now. At least for that, right? Since it's something that is kind of easily fixable, if we know the schema, or we can introspect the type data. We can just say that a Boolean is a Boolean, and a string is a string, and an integer is an integer.
Yeah, and the fact that we don't have test for those things are maybe also an indication that that is something that we should do beforehand as well, because otherwise we may end up changing the normalization for a given field type, and hence breaking JSON API consumers. But they wouldn't be aware that we would be changing that. So having the test coverage to know that those responses would be changing or not would allow us to at least be conscious of making changes to those normalized responses.
Yeah.
But it's tricky stuff and it's a lot of work.
I think
but I can work on it.
Then, like the next iteration to the patch that Chris was suggesting, to add the validation would be, instead of adding the generic JSON API format validation to every request, is to be able to generate schemas for every bundle and then validate against that. Because if we generate the schemas properly, it will say that this field needs to be a Boolean, and we will get an error saying, hey, you're saying this is a Boolean, and you're outputting a string. So what's going on?
Yep.
But
that would help. Then we would have more prescriptive documentation, and we would be making very conscious decisions about how to normalize certain types of Drupal data into JSON API format. And yeah, it would prevent future surprises, because we would be establishing right now, before beta, how we want to handle those field types. So it would be a stronger guarantee. So in that way, it's preferable. The question is if it really needs to block the beta branch. It's tricky. But regardless of beta, just posted a link in the chat. January 8, we had 116 users of the JSON API contrib module, and the week after, so the past week, we had 142. So adoption is rising regardless of alpha versus beta.
Hooray! Yeah. That is cool. I wonder how the people that are already using it feel about backwards compatibility changes that have happened lately. But I don't think that we will get hands on those people easily. But
so in JavaScript, like, it's not a problem, right? Because you don't have those strict types anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
but
like,
we changed.
What do you mean by that exactly, Daniel? Because if you decode JSON into JavaScript objects, then you do get integers. So for example, you would get a map or a hash where the values would actually be Booleans or integers if we actually do send Booleans and integers in JSON. And right now, that wouldn't be the case. So it's not like it would massively break things, but it would be like you would be getting a hash, a JavaScript hash that is of an unexpected format.
Well, but I mean, for example, like a Boolean false, that would be, it's currently represented as a
string zero.
String zero, and that evaluates as false.
Yeah. You can typically use any integer or Boolean and their string representation interchangeably in JavaScript code, and not many usages will complain. But if you do things like assume that the output is always a string and execute a string method on it, maybe I don't know, index of, then that it would break.
Yes, that's a good example of where it would break. Plus, the other thing is that if you are getting responses that are, for example, string zero, then you don't really know how it is stored on a Drupal site. Like, you have to kind of guess what kind of field it actually is. And if it's a Boolean, then it's clear that it's a Boolean. But maybe if it's string zero, it could be string zero, string one, but maybe also string two. Maybe it's a tri-state thing, not a Boolean thing. You know, it also conveys information. For
that, I would argue that you, as a consumer of an API, should not try to convey information.
No, but you know it will happen, and it's better to just avoid it. And if we would just be sending a Boolean, it would not be a problem.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But that kind of ties with the necessity of having a good schema that defines the data. But anyways, yeah, we keep coming back to that, and it's a little bit blocked on the schemata module and the horrible fork I did of it.
Maybe Ted has some insight on that, because I know he's been working a lot on schemata related stuff, not in the last few weeks, but before that for sure.
So it's JSON API is dependent on schemata?
No. So I did a fork of schemata to simplify the use that it was doing by avoiding the dependency on REST completely.
Oh,
and
yeah, that would be nice.
Just using routes, and instead of having to define formats for the data format, like they have JSON schema for HAL JSON, JSON schema, that kind of thing. Define the two things separately, like the format of the data, which is JSON schema. We are defining the schemas in JSON schema, and the format that you're describing. So this way it's a little bit more orthogonal, and you can reuse a bunch of code that you couldn't in the other scenario. So, but everything else is very, very useful. I think I send you someday a link to it.
I'm following it, but I don't. It's in the schemata module issue queue, right?
It's in the schemata issue queue, and I'm gonna paste the link in here if I can find the window. All right. Yeah. Yeah, there is no documentation whatsoever, but you need to go back to that issue in the schemata module, and it kind of explains what this repo does.
Okay.
But in any case, we're kind of locked on seeing how we proceed moving forward, because it feels like the schemata module wants to adapt to this, but there is no clear answer, and therefore, this is kind of locked on getting an expectation of, is this going to be merged or not? Because if not, then I won't work on it.
And what are you using it for? The schemata module itself?
This is to generate schemas for the JSON API module, which is not driving anything at the moment, because we still don't get any official thing, but it would be used to validate every output of the JSON API against the schema of an article. And that would give us the opportunity to validate that the status field, for instance, is a Boolean and not a string 0 or string 1.
So it would be dependent on it at some point.
It could. Yeah, I see it as a soft dependency, something like if it's enabled, you can do extra validation, but if not, But yeah, that's the idea. Just give me if you have any thoughts about the repo that I sent you, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I'll take a look. The only problem I hit was I was just trying to get the schema, and you got something behind you. And it actually was required the route be on, which was a problem. Or be enabled, the particular route be enabled, because in the schema itself, it was pointing to it.
Yeah. Anyways, so is there, I'm going to just, unless you have anything that you guys want to talk about, I'm going to just throw the question of, is there anything that requires my immediate attention for review and merge purposes? I know that you, Daniel, have been working on several patches lately. Is there anything that you feel that deserves a good review?
Not sure where the status of those actually are.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just let me know if anything is blocking you. Just ping me in IRC, and I will find a moment to unblock you.
Cool.
I don't have anything either right now. So I think we're all good.
We're all good. That's the status that we like. Anyways, sorry for the short meeting and for rushing at the end, but I need to drop.
That's totally fine. This was a good meeting, very short, but lots of good stuff. So thanks.
Yes, I think so. And getting closer. Not really there for the beta, but yeah, getting closer.
Cool. Talk to y'all later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.